It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. And it's been a busy day for your boy already. As I was a little bit earlier today at the Mystics introductory presser, sat down with their new head coach, Sydney Johnson, new general manager, Jamila Weideman, and great conversations with both of them. They'll be up in our podcast feed and at Hoffman W Sports on YouTube later on this evening. And we're actually going to play the interview in full with Sydney, the new head coach, coming up at 5:30. We'll get back to football here in about 15 minutes, less than that, really. Chris is going to pop back in. Yep, more Rooster for everybody. We got the Rooster coming back in because he was going hard on Zach Ertz being the Commanders' most important free agent to re-sign earlier today. So we will talk to him about that and then get to some of your list of who's most important for the Commanders coming up at 4:30. But I actually want to start today talking about the press conference that I was at. And if you're not a basketball person or a Mystics person, I think you'll still find the next 10 minutes fairly interesting because really, it's not about specifically what was said today to the Mystics next year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. We have, as sports fans in D.C., over the last 2 years, really, been on kind of an odyssey of team building. And we've seen different methods, different focuses, but also a lot of crossover, I think, between the Wizards and the Commanders, and now the Mystics are officially in on this as well. The Spirit have kind of rebuilt on the fly. The Nationals are ongoing in their rebuild. So we have been in this bizarre place where we are just surrounded as sports fans, no matter what your favorite sport is, basically, unless it's hockey. And even then, the Capitals had to do some shifting. I don't know if I use the word rebuild, but they had to obviously shift some things around, and that group got it right. They're currently one of the best teams in the NHL and are steamrolling towards hopefully a deep run in the playoffs. But we'll see how the back half of the season goes post All-Star break. But for the Wizards and the Commanders, who are certainly two teams that we talk about the most on this show. I don't want to say most popular and upset, whether it's Nationals fans or Capitals fans, whatever. But certainly the Commanders are the most popular team in town. And then the Wizards, basketball is certainly, no pun intended, basketball has been my favorite sport forever. And kind of how I came up in D.C. as much as anything was covering that 2016 Wizards playoff run. And I know how much DC is a basketball city. It's been really fascinating to watch because, Michael Winger, who you'll hear from actually in a moment, and Will Dawkins on the Wizards side have been constrained by the bounds of the NBA and their roster situation, and that doesn't allow them to quickly pivot. Pivoting in the NBA is really, really hard and takes a lot of time until the exact moment where you can make that big move or you win the draft lottery, and then all of a sudden it goes from this very long-term marathon to some level of sprint. Look at 2 years ago, San Antonio's in this rebuild, accumulate assets. They win the draft lottery. They get Wemby. A year later at the trade deadline, they're training for De'Aaron Fox. It happens fast in the NBA. And in some ways, the NFL can be a little similar. It just so happens that we picked up the team building process in a year where the Commanders have the second pick in the draft in a generational quarterback draft where there could be multiple Hall of Famers in this thing. By the time it's all said and done, certainly prospects with that kind of ceiling and Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May at the very least. Obviously, the Falcons think that Michael Penix is that kind of prospect to take him with the top 10 pick and on down the list. So to hear Michael Winger specifically, who I think is the biggest combination of thoughtful and expressive about team building, speak today, I thought was fascinating and something that is going to be interesting to any DC sports fan, any sports fan, period. And Michael, I will say this, first of all, Michael is a brilliant writer. It actually makes me angry. I'm like, how are you someone who's very smart about basketball and all that stuff, and then, the 3 times a year that you hold press conferences, or the 4 times a year you hold press conferences, you come out with this folder of paper and a script, and it's the best written script I'll hear all year. And I'm a guy who, okay, I don't write a lot for this show, but sometimes I'll write some stuff down, and I'm like, damn, that's some good writing. But Winger comes out and he talked about, obviously some of the core tenets of the franchise. Some of those have some real crossover with, obviously, what the Wizards are building. He's not going to be like, oh, in the WNBA or in the NBA, we believe in joy and competitiveness, and we think everyone should be miserable and non-competitive on the WNBA side. Like, of course not. There are certain things about how he thinks about the sport, and I think sports in general, and team building that are universal. But those factors, the way it played into their search was pretty fascinating. And Michael Winger specifically honed in on some of the characteristics as they think about this ever-evolving landscape in the WNBA. And this was kind of a theme today between the multiple conversations I had. The league, it's a very scattered league. Like the NBA is very homogenous. You have a lot of teams that are trying to chase shooting three-pointers. That is the entire sport. We're going to play fast and shoot threes. And there are teams doing that in the WNBA. Perhaps no one better than Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever. They played super fast last year. They put a bunch of threes, and they doubled down on that with some of the acquisitions they made this offseason, where they have players that are going to help them play fast and contribute in the three-point realm. And they re-signed Kelsey Mitchell and to go with Caitlin, who's kind of her running gun partner. And there are other teams, the New York Liberty win the title with three players who can all be super versatile, kind of chasing that versatility where Jonquel Jones can be a big inside or shoot threes at 6'5". Breanna Stewart might be the most versatile player of the entire game. Sabrina Ionescu is a guard who's a premier shooter, but also does a lot of other stuff. And then you have a team like Las Vegas, who was the two-time defending champions going into last season, built around a almost old school post type player in Asia Wilson, who in many ways it's like San Antonio, which of course Becky Hammon, their head coach, has San Antonio Spurs ties, was built around Tim Duncan for years and years. So there's different ways to go about it. And because of that, Michael Winger wanted to give himself some level of flexibility as he made the hires that were ultimately announced today.
We determined that we would over-index happily on a few key things. The first was extreme intelligence. The second was a depth of connectivity with professional athletes as performers, as people, as daughters, as partners, as moms. And the third was an intimate knowledge of the why and how to impact and develop the women behind the jerseys. It sounds a little altruistic, and for us it is. Between the lines, we care about athleticism, skill, competitiveness, timing, and force. These are the things that we think win basketball games. But our athletes spend 90% of their lives outside the lines, and that 90% has an enormous impact on the passion and the quality of the time that they spend, the 10% between the lines. And that means a few things for us.
They were big on that. That's kind of their thing on the Mystics side, is the 90-10. 90% of their lives they're going to spend not playing basketball. So how do we help contribute to the 90% that the 10% is better? And, of course, it makes me think about some of the stuff they said about the Wizards and many of the same things, and where they have players who are like, hey, I know we're losing like crazy, but, like, at least it's a good place to work. We're happy. Our families are taken care of. Like, there's just stuff that we don't have to worry about that allows us to be our best. But it also makes me think about the Commanders, where a lot of the things that Josh Harris was able to do much more instantly was fix some of the stuff that, for instance, Dan Snyder didn't care about. Dan Snyder didn't give a rip about players' families. He didn't care at all. Josh Harris was like, we need to make sure that players have a place where they can meet with their families after the game, seats where they know that their families are going to be okay and taken care of. Like, it is a priority for us because making sure that that stuff is in line. And that also goes to, like, the quality of the food, the availability of mental health professionals or medical consultants on physical therapy, or in a clip that I'm not going to quite have time to play here, Jamila Weideman, the general manager of the Mystics, talks about if you don't have a sleep consultant for your team in 2025, like, not only are you not serving the players, but you're not maximizing their ability to perform because sleep is so vitally important. And so I think it's interesting to watch the things that executives in sports talk about now. Because, and Adam Peters talks about it differently, Dan Quinn talks about it differently, but it's a lot of the same tenets. Their emphasis in the NFL and the way they go about it as football guys, like they talk up the intensity and the competitiveness side more, but those are tenets that they talk about on the basketball side too. And they do talk about caring for guys and building relationships and the brotherhood. And to hear the New Mystics leadership, for instance, talk about the sisterhood they want to develop, and Sidney Johnson in the interview here at 5:30 talk about the sacrifice that he didn't quite, he's like, I don't want to use the word demand, but really it's demand from the players in order to give up a little bit of yourself for the betterment of the team. It's a lot of the same stuff. And I think ultimately, if I think about like, okay, well, what's my job? My job is to, give my opinion on all of this. They're all about the right things. And I think something that really clicked for me today, I don't want to pretend like this is profound, it clicked for me today in a profound way. But something that clicked for me today in a big way was ultimately I'm at a point where the executives in charge in this town, I feel really good about their ideas. It's in some ways a time to make a shift in the evaluation of them to go, how well are you actually acting upon those ideas? How well do you ultimately execute the things that you say that you're about? And it's too early to tell on the basketball side of things, obviously on the football side of things, what a job they did in year one as we prepare for offseason number 2 under Adam Peters. Again, you'll hear from Sidney Johnson. That interview coming up at 5:30. Next, though, Chris Russell hops back in as we discuss some of the biggest moves that Peters has to make this offseason. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the team 980. My headphones just get really low. I was like, I can't hear myself. It's because I apparently turned down my headphones. A radio professional. Speaking of radio professionals, Chris Russell is with us. What's up, Rooster?
I don't know about that, but I'm with you.
Chris, I know it's not much, but do you get paid?
I do, yes.
Okay, then you are by definition a
and
professional.
you are correct about your assumption.
Look, I can't imagine our numbers are terribly different, and we'll just leave that there. We are both, by definition, professionals because we get paid.
Yes.
That is what it means to be a professional, at least in the definitional sense. It's the light. I look terrible.
Yeah.
No, I got the new haircut. I got to make sure I look as good as possible on the YouTube stream.
No, you look fine. You look dandy.
Thank you. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I want to make sure we start off from the correct point here. You were going on X and on I refuse to call it X, Twitter. And I'm assuming you talked about on the show as well about Zach Ertz and his importance re-signing. And this thought was spawned in some way by the Travis Kelce news, which may or may not be relevant. But what's the baseline that we're operating for that ultimately lands with the thing I want to talk to you about, which is Zach Ertz the most important incumbent free agent for Adam Peters to resign?
So, I mean, I use the Kelce thing as a springboard because he's undecided, right? And
because you're a radio professional, and that's what we do.
Yeah, and so, you take a newsy item and then you localize it, right? So that's what I tried to do. And at first, before I double-checked, I thought maybe Andy Reid and Zach Ertz had crossed by a year, and I was like, well, if Travis Kelce retires, maybe that might be a spot that Washington would perhaps have some competition for in terms of Zach Ertz. But then I said overall, regardless of that, and they did not cross. They missed each other by a year. I said regardless of that, to me, Zach Ertz, his presence, even at 34, for him to play 17 regular season games, which he had not done in 2 seasons combined, the previous 2 preseason or regular seasons, and then to play all 3 postseason games. And sure, he got knocked around a couple of times, but he made some huge catches. We all know this. Down the stretch, second half, red zone, just a reliable third down, everything. I mean, everybody
fourth
knows,
downs,
right?
By the way, too.
Absolutely.
I think he was literally the leading receiver in the NFL on fourth downs this year.
Correct. And a couple of them on that first drive in Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game. I said, look, I understand he's not likely to be 17, 20 game healthy again next year. I understand injuries happen. I understand he's 34. But on this team and this offense, Craig, and I think you'll agree, he's pretty damn important when you have 4 receivers that are free agents. And even if you bring a couple of them back, you still don't have a true number 1A or 2, and I'm not saying Zach Ertz is that, but you need that because you don't know where Ben Sinnott is. And John Bates is a free agent.
Right. So I would say a couple things. First, just on the health front. Logan and I got the chance to talk to Zach for a podcast in July, August, sometime. Actually, I think it was July. I think it was right before training camp, like the week before. I think he had just reported, but they hadn't actually opened camp. Anyway, the point is, we talked to him, and I, asked him, how you feeling, whole deal. And he's like, honestly, man, this is the best I've felt in years because unlike the previous couple of seasons where he did not play full seasons, those compound. If you finish, because it's like, when did you get hurt? And he finished seasons hurt, meaning he had to spend part of his offseason rehabbing, not actually really preparing for the season. You're just trying to get back to a baseline, and he didn't really get to where he wanted to be. Nevertheless, could he get any better or add something to his game or polish something that needed polish? It was just, can I get healthy enough to be on the field? And he entered last offseason healthy, and he's like, this is a game changer. And sure enough, he goes to play 17 games. And I would say that's relevant for not only Zach Ertz, as you think about him going into this season. He finished the season healthy. Excellent. You have a full offseason. But when I think about, how do we apply that concept to other people that are potentially available? Cooper Kupp is healthy. Cooper Kupp has not finished a lot of seasons healthy as of late, and he has had a couple seasons that look like Zach Ertz's prior couple seasons. So is he going to be prime Cooper Kupp for the Rams or for whoever the Rams trade him to, whether that's the Commanders or not? Certainly not. But could he play a lot more games because he has finished a season healthy? Yes. Is that something that impacts how I feel about potentially getting Cooper Kupp? Sure as does. And I think that a guy like Kupp, I bring up not just for the injury coincidence, but I think they need someone in the Zach Ertz role. and it's got to be a vet, and it's got to be someone Jaden's going to trust. And there is no one better to fill the Zach Ertz role than Zach Ertz. I agree with you. If you don't get it, you need someone who's going to be able to win one-on-one matchups over the middle of the field, reliably get open. Kupp is certainly a guy that can do that. There's probably a couple other guys available if I looked at a list. But I think that, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Zach Ertz does not seem to be broken.
Yeah, and I had mentioned on the show, I said you could do a much better job breaking down all the different routes and whatnot that, you know.
It's not that hard. He runs choice routes, he runs in routes, he runs out routes.
Sit downs,
at
whatever.
7. Yeah,
right.
He's got a great feel for space. Like, it really is not that hard.
I know
for Zach
people are
Ertz.
going to say he falls down right after the catch. I know people are going to, and some of the metrics, obviously, I can't ignore. It's not like he's taking off and he's Tony Gonzalez or Antonio Gates in his prime or
27-year-old Zach Ertz.
Exactly. But he's reliable. I understand he had a couple of drops. I got it. I understand he fell short of the sticks against the Steelers. I got it. I understand that. This team would not have made it to the NFC Championship game without Zach Ertz, period.
No.
Period. And Jaden Daniels would not be as good. And this is not to criticize Jaden Daniels. He would not be as good without Zach Ertz, period.
No, he would not have had the rookie season he had because he had a reliable target and, you know, the ability to extend drives and all of those things. And there's a reason that he was their number one go-to guy on fourth down, and he led the NFL in the fourth down receiving. I think the other side of this equation, like the big question for me on some level with Zach is like, okay, well, is he then in Ben Sinnott's way, and what does that mean? And I just don't get the sense with how the season went that like they're obviously high enough they took him as a second rounder. I wonder if they already have any kind of regrets. That's like too strong, but I don't know what the other word would be about that. Because if a guy's a second-round pick, shouldn't his role theoretically expand throughout the season?
You would think.
And if a guy is killing it in practice and he's as talented from a physical standpoint as Ben Sinnott, you find ways. I know people are like, oh, he just got Ertz. He wound up behind a better player. The sport's too hard to be like, oh, well, we'll just throw guys out there.
Right.
Like, you're always looking for an advantage. These guys are cutthroat. And I think that if Ben Sinnott had shown more to them in practice, in meetings, in whatever, I don't know where in that equation there's something missing, but it's very clear to me that something was missing. Now, being a rookie in the NFL is hard. He could come back next year and be perfectly fine. And if that's the case and they feel confident in that with the offseason or their end-of-season conversation, then you have to be wary of not blocking his development and opportunities. But again, I don't know that that's the case. I would probably think about bringing back Bates as a blocker, Ertz, and then you go from there. And if you have 4 tight ends for next year, and Sinnott, I'm not saying you're going to cut Ben Sinnott by any stretch of the imagination, but like bring in another guy who's got that skill set that Sinnott has to compete with him, a stretch the field type of tight end.
Right.
Like that is something that would not surprise me. And I think if something like that happens, draft or free agency, that tells you a lot about where they feel that he is.
Yeah, and to me, I would bring back Ertz and Bates as well. And kind of like thinking about you, I had to do a free agency preview for Command Post Magazine, which is a Rick Snyder run production available via subscription. And I was like, well, look, I mean, there's not a lot of sexy names on the list, but I'm not spending a lot of money at the tight end position to improve that unless Bates and Ertz price themselves out, which I don't think is going to happen.
Probably
now,
not.
The one thing
maybe
that
one of them does. Like maybe Bates gets a sweet deal from somebody and you're like, look, you're an awesome blocking tight end, but like we can't spend that much.
Right.
And it depends on, because the other thing is, I don't know which role Sinnott fits more into. Is he more, because like he doesn't have the quickness of, like he's a different kind of tight end from both of them.
Right.
He is the guy that will get up the seam and stretch the field. Like he's a long strider, but he's not necessarily the guy that's going to win with quickness in the short area and like be that reliable, pass catching tight end on 3rd and 7 that gets you 8. And this is, by the way, a loaded, not free agent class, but draft class at tight end.
Right.
So that's a funky equation to try to solve as well.
What they tried to do when they drafted Cole Turner in the early part of the 5th round, 3 years ago?
I think so.
Grabbing somebody with athletic traits like that's primarily maybe, assuming that you get Bates and Ertz back along with Sinnott, and don't forget Colson Yankoff obviously can develop too. We'll see about that. But if you can find somebody in the 5th, 6th, 7th round area that has those athletic traits that maybe you can develop in a good offense, in a better system, what have you, with plenty of protection around him, and obviously a better quarterback situation than maybe Cole Turner had to deal with. If you can do that, that's ideally what I would like to do. I'm not spending a lot of money outside of trying to retain Bates and Ertz. And if you ask me, listen, it came up on the show. I don't know if you want to get in here. Like to me, I said the top 3 guys ideally that I would like to retain from this free agent class of the Commanders back to the Commanders this year is Ertz, Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin. You can number them however you want. I haven't really exactly prioritized them. And Tressway would be like 3B or whatever. So those are the, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody will, maybe Adam Peters will say it differently. Maybe the market will make that decision for them. I mean, obviously, I'm not going crazy on a 3-year deal with Zach Ertz for, $7-8 million a year. I mean, we're not talking that. We're talking maybe a 1-year deal with an option year or a second year as a dummy year or what have you for a reasonable amount of money. I don't know what's reasonable. $5-6 million, somewhere in that range?
Yeah, probably. 5 is the number I had in my head, but we'll see. Like I also don't know that I'd let $1 million get in the way of me and my quarterback's best friend last season, or second best friend, if you want to say Terry was first. Yeah. Certainly is his number one safety blanket. Is
that crazy what I said about the free agent retaining group?
No, I think those are the 3 guys I think I have targeted. But, Chris, you have, because you're a radio professional, actually led us directly into our next segment, which is where I'm going to open up the phones at 301-230-0980. Again, 301-230-0980. That is exactly the question that we are asking. Like, who is your top person? And I'm going to say before I give my final answer, there might be someone I'm forgetting about. I'm sure if that's the case, the callers will let me know. I'm sure they'll do it very gently. That's the nature of things. Sure. I know they're very, very gentle with you as well.
Oh, yes. Very.
So we're going to take your calls at 301-230-0980 next. Chris, thank you, sir, for sticking around.
Craig. Appreciate
it. The Chris Russell Show is 1 to 4 here on the Team 980. Check him out tomorrow. If you want more Chris Russell right now, I guess I won't get too offended, but the podcast is available. All right, we'll be back with your calls next. The phone number is 301-230-0980. You can also hit us on the YouTube chat at the Team 980 where we are streaming live. Anthony, we probably should have not put a call-heavy segment in the rundown today. This might have been a production mistake. When I say production mistake, I don't mean to say you as the producer of the show. Collectively, production mistake from us. There is nobody on the roads today. The entire everything got shut down.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm sure there are people out there listening somehow, some way. Some of y'all are listening on the Odyssey app, whatever. I don't know. I'm as fast as I can getting to the YouTube stream to see if there's folks chiming in there because I feel like we might have some audience there because folks are watching from home. Oh yeah, we got some folks chiming in there, so we'll get to those comments in a second. But people that are driving down the Beltway calling into the show, I don't know that they exist today.
Yeah, and I should have realized that too. It only took me 30 minutes to get to work today. Usually it takes me about 45 to 50. I might, sit in some traffic, and I had none of those concerns.
No, it was a weird day. And by the way, we will talk about what we said we're going to talk about in a second. 301-230-0980. We'll talk about it amongst ourselves, and then we'll take your calls if folks are actually going to call in. Also, Anthony, did you grow a foot, or did the camera get knocked where you look a lot taller?
That's a great question. I don't think I grew.
Okay, you want to angle your camera up a little bit? Or, did I get shorter in my little box on my side of the screen? Yeah, let's angle that. No, other camera. Yep. Nope, not that one. There we go. Now we're moving. Okay, see now if you lean back into your normal spot. That's more like it. Definitely some of it. Anthony for the radio audience, has a beanie on, and it's got the palm on the top. So he definitely is taking up his space, his head space in the camera shot. Definitely is a little bit more, a little bit off.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, driving.
Yeah.
Driving. Where I'm currently driving the show off the road. Theoretically speaking, metaphorically speaking. But I was talking with one of the people who also covers the Mystics today because I was at that press conference, and she was telling me that getting into work was terrible. Her getting to Capital One Arena from this part of town, from south, was brutal. And for me coming from north of Capital One Arena through DC from where I live, wasn't that bad at all. And the streets were not only clear in terms of paved, and they did a great job with the salt and everything, but they also, nobody was driving. Dead ass, empty roads. Saw 6 other cars driving to Capital One Arena at 10:15 a.m. this morning. It was great for me, but I don't know how great it's going to be for the show. I think it's so bad that we just had someone call in and then they hung up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where he went. Maybe his phone. Maybe he got another call.
Maybe. Sometimes it'd be like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'd be like that. All right, we'll see if we get some calls next, 301-230-0980. In the meantime, also, I should tell you, Mike Jones from The Athletic is going to join us at 5 o'clock, talk about the Commanders and the bigger picture of the NFL and some final thoughts from Mike and his week in New Orleans. But let's see. You go back and listen. People talking about Ben Sinnott. Sinnott regressed as the season went on. He needs to show more in year 2. I'd rather spend our money in the trenches on both sides of the ball and wide receiver. Ertz will be cheap and serviceable for one more year. That's the thing is importance and cost don't always necessarily go together. I do not think that Zach Ertz, one, is going to cost some exorbitant amount. He was very good, but there's not going to be 20 teams that are like, oh my God, we have to sign Zach Ertz. 2, I don't know how many other places Zach is going to want to play. If you're Zach and you made the comments you made after the season, which we assume come from a pure place, right? And you're like, I wish I was 22 so I could play the rest of my career with Jaden Daniels. And I could redo my career, basically. A guy who might go to the Hall of Fame and is like, I would rather just do it all over again with this kid. How many other places are going to give him that? Like, he's made a ton of money, and he will continue to make money. Like Zach will go into media, or Zach and his wife Julie, who's a soccer Hall of Famer. You probably know Julie Ertz, multiple-time World Cup winner, etc. Like they will have a life after football that can be lucrative if they want to on the speaking circuit. Like Zach Ertz financially gonna be just fine. So if he's playing football, like, not to be screwed, it's not like he's going to be like, well, in that case, Adam, just give me a league minimum deal and whatever's best for the team. But if they pay him a $5 million deal, $6 million deal, how many other places could pay him that amount of money and he'd be like, I'm going to be happy here? I think if, like, Philly would be interesting. I don't think they're going to be interested in him, but, like, going back to where it all started, and obviously they're a Super Bowl favorite. He was in Detroit at the end of last year. I don't know whether he wants to do that or whether he'd probably just assume stay here. If, like, Cincinnati came calling and they're like, hey, we need to find another weapon to go with Jamar, that could be an interesting type of thing. But he's a West Coast guy. He's an Arizona guy. So I don't think he wants to go to some random East Coast city. I think he came here because of Cliff. And so ultimately, like, that's the thing. If you're talking about Zach Ertz specifically, is what did he say last year? I want to play for Cliff the rest of my career if I can make that happen. There's one thing. Cliff is here. 2, he would just assume start his career over at 22 years old and play with Jaden Daniels for the rest of it. He only gets that here. I don't think there needs to be a number 3, but he, like, enjoyed the community. He just had his twins were born here. Their second and third child were born here, and, like, I'm sure they have some level of routine here during the season. I'm sure they'll go back to Arizona or California or wherever they want to go during the offseason, but, like, it's not like he's got to find a house or whatever. Like, they have their place here, I presume. And could probably sign a second year on their lease or however they're doing it. So it just, I guess what I'm saying, Anthony, is I feel like Zach Ertz will be back.
I think he'll be back as well. Especially just going off, what he said at the end of the season last year. The fact this team was on the up and up. The fact last year was really supposed to be a year where it was supposed to be a down year, essentially. And the success we had, I do think if he does come back, though, this actually might be his, like, last ride kind of thing.
Maybe.
And, like, again, like, nobody knew we were going to, have as much success. So I just think just that alone, the quarterback we have here, the owner we have, the head coach, those 4 things, like,
I'll add one more for Zach specifically. He's got a ring.
Oh, that too.
He was on the 2018 Eagles. And so I think if you are him and you don't have a ring and, like, you're just playing because you're chasing a championship, you don't care if you don't play a snap. You want to be you want to be able to lift the Lombardi one time. Okay. That maybe it opens the aperture of options. He's already got one. I think if does he desperately want a second? Of course. But do you want to just go anywhere for the second, or do you want to do it with a group of guys that you genuinely love and you're going to enjoy the process? I think he's probably in the latter camp. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, there is another report out today about another Commanders incumbent free agent who is the most likely to get not another one-year deal, but a potential long-term deal in Washington. We'll tell you who and who reported it next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Who are the top Commanders incumbent free agents that you want to see back in 2025? That's our question at 301-230-0980. And Mark in Largo is going to get us started. Mark, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's up, Craig? How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. What's so funny?
All right, that's good. No, because I think you know where this conversation's gonna go. But anyway, the people they need to bring back is Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, Mariota. I mean, you could bring back Achias. I would bring him back before I bring back De'Ami Brown. I'm just not a big seller in De'Ami Brown. I think he's going to command a lot of money because of his playoff performance, and I don't really think he's deserved it. And that's about it on that part. I do have a request, though, that I think they should do as far as a receiver. And I don't mean to do this. Craig, I really, really like you. I really do. But the conversation we had 2 weeks ago, today, by the way, we really should revisit and get DK Metcalf. I know you hate him. I know you do.
I don't hate him. He's not worth it.
Yes, you do. Well, okay, but you would pay the money for
Mark,
T.
don't
Higgins,
tell me how I
who's not
feel.
durable.
Don't tell me how I feel about another human being. That's weird.
Okay, I'm sorry. But T. Higgins, you would pay the money for T. Higgins, who's not durable.
That's not what I said. I said if I had to pick between the two, I would pick T. Higgins. but I don't have to pick between
he's
the
not
two,
durable.
and neither does Adam Peters,
I
because
mean,
they don't live in this
okay,
very
so let
silly
me ask you-
hypothetical world that you apparently live in, where you have binary
okay, and
choices
that's
as
fair.
opposed to an entire free agent market.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair, Craig. But let me ask you this. Let me throw this out at you.
Okay.
Don't you think people like Garrett Wilson, people like Deebo Samuel, I'm not saying they're going after those guys, but they're similar to Terry. Don't you want to get someone that's different than Terry?
Hold on,
I
Mark.
look at A.J. Brown.
Mark. Did you just say Deebo Samuel, Garrett Wilson, and Terry McLaurin are similar players?
The size, the body structures.
What does that
Craig.
have to do with anything of how they play?
Because if you have two guys of the same ilk, you're going to have – look at Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a guy that's 6 foot that can run and fly in Devontae Smith, and you got another guy that's just a brawler in A.J. Brown. They're two different types of receivers.
Yeah, but like
what I'm
Terry
trying
and
to say.
Deebo are incredibly different types of receivers just because they're the same size. How? Debo's a slot guy who's better with the ball in his hands. Debo's not even, like, he's half a receiver. He's a space player. He's a gadget guy at his absolute best. Terry is a bona fide X receiver who just happens to be a little bit undersized for a traditional X receiver, but he's a vertical threat down the field, comebacks, goes, and also is just an absolute behemoth on slants, and he's a contested catch guy. The exact opposite of a space player.
Let me ask you something. Would it piss you off if they do make a trade for DK Metcalf?
Piss me off? No, I just don't
Yeah.
think that would be the best use of resources, nor do I think they'll do it because I don't think DK is their kind of guy.
Jesus Christ, you sound like you're Kyle Shanahan now, man.
Was that supposed to be an insult?
No, it's not an insult, Craig. You're a very good guy, and you know what you're saying. I just think you need guys that's going to scare that defense. The Eagles have a dominant defense. They got a dog for defense. Now, if you want to go get Deebo Samuel and you want to get Garrett Wilson and line him up,
When
along
did Garrett
Terry,
Wilson
and
enter this
that's gonna
equation?
scare The Eagles go right ahead, but I think DK Metcalf would scare them more than anything else. You're sitting up here talking about personalities. I understand that. I get it. I totally get it.
Do
But at
you?
the
Or
same
do you just
time,
want to yell on the
you gotta look at
radio?
your competition. No, I'm saying, Craig, you got to look at your competition. You got to look at your competition because somebody else will get DK. And if we're going to be sitting up here
Okay.
looking stupid. But look, it's okay. It's all good. We both have different opinions, and that's fair. So you have a good one. Thanks, man.
Hey, that was a spirited debate, man. You guys are.
Was it, or did I just not really say a whole lot other than some bare bell bones facts about these players, or I guess you want to call them opinions on these players? And then he just really wanted to yell at me about DK Metcalf.
I just really trying to get across to you that,
He thinks DK Metcalf is scarier to the Eagles than a bunch of other players that are. I don't want to say they're better necessarily, because I don't think Deebo Samuel's a better player than DK Metcalf. They're just very, very different.
Yeah.
People. DK Metcalf is a do you know ball test. If you know ball, you know that DK Metcalf, being 6'4", 230 pounds, and 3% body fat while he somehow eats Skittles, is not how DK Metcalf plays. And some people literally cannot get on that. You've never turned on the film. You've never actually watched him play outside of 4 highlight plays where DK decides once a quarter to use his big body. He plays like a small slot receiver or a small. You want to know who he actually plays a lot like? A 6'1" really fast type of player. With Devontae's got way better hands, but Terry plays bigger than DK. And then people want to argue with me about that. I don't make them play that way. I just have actually, watched the tape and listened to experts and who know even more than I do. And I don't know why Mark wanted to yell at me about DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
That
point
was weird.
you're making, it's more so consistently, he's not physically imposing his will on people. as he should. Like
No, like he's not a great contested catch guy.
that too.
Which seems. Hold on. Let me see if I can look this up real quick. Keep saying what you were saying, Anthony. I shouldn't have said hold on. I should have typed in silence. My bad.
And then I think in the run game as a blocker, he is very physical, or he can be. But again, down in and down out, we want a guy that's going to be consistent. And I don't necessarily know if that's him. And you also
It's
bring
definitely not him.
up the fact that he's not the greatest, just pure hands catcher or just catcher of the ball in general. I think that is a bit of a concern. So I don't know. I mean, when he asked me if I wanted DK, I was like, man, it'd be cool, but also the money that he's going to demand. I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to give up draft capital and have to give DK Metcalf a new contract where he thinks he's going to be one of the highest paid players in football.
Yeah.
Like, no thanks.
If he was Chase, if he was CD, all right, I'm all the way in. I don't mind paying that kind of money, but I'm not just about to just pay DK Metcalf. Like, he's a good player. He is a good player, but
Yeah, I'm not telling you DK Metcalf's a bad football player. He's just not the football player that the people that are going to the mat for DK Metcalf think he is.
Yeah.
Trying to find contested. Do you know who has contested catch rate? Contested catch rate.
PF.
NFL. I was looking at PFF. I didn't see it.
33rd team maybe.
I don't. Let's see. There's a PFF article on Terry. Do they have the? Dun, 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 dun. I don't see it. I'll see if I can find it in the break. Anyway. Yeah, I'm out on DK. We'll have the Debo conversation maybe later in the show. We will get the latest on how those trade markets could develop from Mike Jones of The Athletic next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And just after 5 o'clock, it is indeed time for Not My Beat. It would help if all the computers were in the right place. Now they are. It's time, he said, for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Our pleasure today to welcome back a great friend of the show. It's Mike Jones from The Athletic, who is, well, Mike, let me ask this genuinely. After a week in New Orleans for the Super Bowl, how are you?
I'm good. I'm tired. I'm fatter. I'm, just catching my breath, and it was a good week. But yeah, season's over, and we take a little nap and then head to the combine in like less than 2 weeks.
And somehow, I was telling the story on the air yesterday, 2 days ago, something. Mike, somehow you will be the first person I see at the combine. Like when I get in the convention center and I go to get my credential and I take that lap, you will be the first person I see because that's what happens literally every single year.
It does seem like that happens. Yeah, for sure.
You'll be well rested because you will have taken a nap from the time this phone call ends until you get on your plane from Indianapolis, because that's what a week in New Orleans demands. I'm sure you're down there, you're talking to a million people, and it seems like as these various trade stories start to heat up, the Commanders are involved in all of them, and it's a logical thing to think that a team that was just in the NFC Championship game would want to make improvements, and the big names that come up for various reasons, like, Washington's connected there. Do you think that is just people connecting the dots, or do you think the Commanders are legitimately like shopping around and some of these bigger moves, whether it be a Myles Garrett if he moves from Cleveland, a Cooper Kupp from LA, a Deebo Samuel, or whoever else's name comes up over the next couple of weeks?
I think they're going to be smart. I think that we might see them maybe take one big swing, but not go after like all these guys. I mean, in the old Dan Snyder days, yeah, they would have given up every single draft pick this year and next year to get all three of the guys you just named right there. But I think that Adam Peters, Dan Quinn are going to be calculated about this. They'll figure out, okay, what is our value on these picks? What are the guys that we see in the draft that can help us with these picks? Can this guy put us over the top as a veteran acquisition, and are we willing to meet the asking price? And so we'll see. Again, I don't see them going after multiple guys. Maybe they could go after somebody, but I think people look at them and think, okay, they're really close. So they went after Marshawn Lattimore, and so they're going to go after more veterans. But I think that they're going to be smart. They've got a lot of cap space. They got, draft picks. And I don't know that you really want to just mortgage the future, giving up all your draft picks to get some guys that, like Cooper Kupp, has been hurt a lot. And, Myles Garrett is the best player in the league right now. But Deebo Samuel, is he on the downside? I don't know. So we'll see.
I'm guessing you kind of maybe got ahead of my next question there. I'm guessing if you were Adam Peters and you could make one of these moves, Myles Garrett would far and away be that move, and that's including knowing what it will cost / what will it cost, you think, ultimately, to get Myles Garrett out of Cleveland?
Yeah, well, we'll see if the Browns will play. They've said that they want to hang on to him. They don't plan on it. Now, you can say that, but if somebody calls with enough, then, you might change your mind. Do we want to see Washington give up a first or multiple firsts, or a first and a third, or a first and a second, multiple years to get Myles Garrett? I don't know. If you can do it for a second and a third, maybe so. I think that he is a game changer. I think, having him on your defense would take this unit, which was steadily improving, and it would help every level of the defense. It's going to make the other guys on the defensive front better because he's going to command so much attention. It's going to make the guys in your secondary better because he's going to be getting after the quarterback, and you're not going to have to be covered as long. So, again, if the Browns are willing and Washington can get out of here without mortgaging both like this year's draft and next year's draft, then I think you do it. But say you have to give a first this year, a first next year, man, that's kind of hard to do, even though he is, a fantastic player.
Mike Jones from The Athletic with us here on the Hoffman Show. As you talk to GMs around the league and you get the intel that you do on deals, like how big of a deal, no pun intended, is it that Washington has the 29th pick this year versus some of the other teams that might be sniffing around, picking up higher in the draft? Like they can only offer what they have, but obviously that feels like it would be some consideration. And the fact that pick is so late in the first round, how much of a detriment is that to Washington on the trade market?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not as attractive as, say, somebody's got a top 10 pick, then you're talking. But, is it something you can package with another player? But I don't know what players you have that you could really dangle. And, again, in that case, then it probably would have to be, draft picks in multiple years. If you're going up against somebody who's offering a top 10 pick, it might be hard for Washington. But at the same time, Myles Garrett has got to want to go to that place. He's not going to go and play for a crappy team just because they're offering a really, handsome price, because he can make it difficult. And so, we'll see. Again, not having a top 10 pick, not having a pick even in the teens kind of hurts you, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible.
That's a good point, too, on Garrett's side of this. Mike Jones from The Athletic with us. And, Mike, you've done such a great job over the years of really handicapping the coaching market. That's an area where you've done a lot of reporting. I'm going to use the word bizarre. How bizarre was the coaching cycle to you this time around with how some of the pieces fell, some of the names that didn't get involved? Like, how bizarre, unique, or maybe what word would you use to describe this time around the NFL's coaching carousel?
Ridiculous?
That works. That works.
I mean, look, the way the Patriots handled their whole thing was ridiculous. I mean, and they could have had Mike Vrabel last year. Yes, I know they had Gerard Mayo as the coach in waiting in his contract, but you very well could have said, "Look, I'm sorry, I don't think you're ready. You're paying him to not work right now anyway, so." You could have just given him a little bit of a settlement money and been like, hey, we're going to keep grooming you, developing you. We got to go get this guy right here. And then the whole, Jacksonville and their situation where they held on to Trent Baalke so long that they, who knows, would Ben Johnson have wanted to go work with Trevor Lawrence instead of Caleb Williams if there was no Trent Baalke blocking his way? You never know. But they took forever down there, and finally, weeks into the process, you decide to fire Trent Baalke, and then you go after Liam Cohen, who, I don't know, man. Yes, I know he had a great year with Baker Mayfield, but he's got 5 years of NFL coaching experience and doesn't have a big Rolodex, and so finding quality assistants has been challenging. So I don't know what his chances of success are down there. I did like Pete Carroll going to the Raiders. I know they had wanted Liam Cohen, but I think for them, a team that's got to rebuild and get this thing working the right way, you need a head coach that's been there, done that, and I think Pete Carroll will do a lot of good for them. So, and then the other ridiculous one was Dallas. I mean, what are you doing, Jerry Jones? To drag the whole thing out as long as you did. You could have maybe had Ben Johnson, could have maybe had Mike Vrabel, and, or even Aaron Glenn, and you mess around and then settle on Brian Schottenheimer, who I think maybe has coached one top 10 offense in, 2 decades worth of being an offensive coordinator. I just don't understand how that makes Dallas better. And I don't think that Jerry Jones really cares about making them better. He just wants to continue to be the star. And he's, hoping that they can keep things running the way they were and then somehow get a different result, even though, you've got a guy that nobody else was interested in as a head coach. I just don't know. I mean, it's just a lot of these hires, we've come out of several years being like, oh, this is a bunch of smart hires. But you're looking at a lot of these and you're just kind of just like, ugh, man, what were they thinking?
Yeah, Mike, I think you'll remember this, or you might have had the same thought. I'm curious, but especially once I put it in your head, like what you make of it, because you were covering the NBA around the time that the ownership started to really shift there. where you started to have less, I'm going to call dumb owners, just like less old school, like used to the way that the business was being done in the league. And you had some of these new school guys, and like Cuban was obviously the biggest name of them, where they were hiring bigger, smarter front offices, and they had analytics departments. And then you just have these smart front offices absolutely destroying the dumb/old front offices and trades.
Right.
And it feels like, are we kind of at that moment in the NFL that there's been a couple of new ownership changes, there's new folks in charge in multiple places, and certainly here is one of them, that there are just, and some, to some owners' credit, some of them have evolved and been like, oh, clearly we're not doing enough here, let's add some more resources here, there. Like, are we starting to see a bigger chasm amongst, or in the NFL, thanks purely to the way that ownership approaches building a front office that then infiltrates every part of the haves and have-nots of this league?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have teams that if they're going to keep doing it the old way, they're going to get left behind, I mean, we're seeing where a team like, the Eagles, who have an aggressive GM, and a fantastic talent evaluation department, they are, they won the Super Bowl. They've been in the Super Bowl 2 of the last 3 years, and now they've got, through 2 Super Bowl victories in the last 7. Then in the same division, you have the Giants, who are still kind of doing it the old-fashioned way, and they're not getting anywhere. And the Cowboys, who are stuck where they are, whereas Washington, they really have beefed up and bought into the analytics and things like that. And you have a smart young GM and an owner who's, into embracing a new way of doing things, even though he's new to the league too, but he understands the philosophy. And so, yeah, I think you're going to see teams, and, you wonder, if, okay, what is it going to take for some of these owners to kind of change and try to keep up? And some of them might not, because just having a team is enough for them. Like Jerry Jones is still making tons of money. He's still packing them in, even though they haven't been to an NFC championship game since 1995. But if you want real results, you've got to ride the wave. And, eventually these owners are going to die off and new owners will be in place like we're seeing here, and change will be more widespread.
Yeah, I think it's funny for Dallas that when that ultimately happens with Jerry, it'll just go to Steven, who is, in his 60s probably. And
Right.
the only way he knows how to do business is the way he's grown up doing it with the Cowboys. So that one's going to be fun for Commanders and Eagles and Giants fans to look on from afar for the Cowboys. I'm sure the league is absolutely thrilled about that. Mike Jones from The Athletic with us here on the Hoffman Show. Mike, all right, as far as I'm concerned, you can go to sleep till the Combine, and I'll see you in Indianapolis. But good luck with everything you're working on until then, and I'll see you in Indy.
All right. Thanks, Craig. I will see you very soon.
Indeed, my friend. Indeed. That's Mike Jones with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, let's pick up on that ownership thought and just how behind some of these teams are and whether or not they can change. I think that's an interesting conversation as well, because there's one team I have in mind too where they've actually done the pivot despite not changing ownership. We'll talk about that next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Anthony Haney, super producer over there. That guy. Oh, nope. That guy. I have to point the way the camera works. Because you're actually over there.
I know.
But I need your box is there. I've thought about switching that. Every time I do, I'm like, I like being on the left.
Does it work for me?
Yeah. It doesn't really matter. What if I just switched it, like right now? How hard is that to do? I think it's actually probably harder than it should be.
I think I will be looking the opposite way though.
Let's see.
Or would I?
What happens if I drag this over here?
Do I need to look this way to be looking at you?
Yeah, so if we do that and then I switch it around, now I'm on the right side of the screen. But if I turn like that, now it looks like I'm looking at you in the box.
Let me look.
If you're looking directly at me, well, just because the thing is, the way our studio is currently set up is I have a computer in front of me with a camera right in front of me, and then over there is Anthony, and he actually is staring at the side of my head right now. But when Anthony looks at his camera, he's looking at me. He's just looking at the side of my head.
Yeah.
I think eventually we're gonna try to see if the whole engineering crew can just turn the studio.
To be honest, I think it worked for me either way.
Yeah, you're not affected because your camera and me don't change.
Yeah.
But now if I'm like, hey, Anthony, and I want to talk to you, it looks like I'm now looking at your box on the screen.
Oh, nice.
So should we keep it this way?
I think so.
This is going to take some getting used to.
Let's see how, let's give it a week.
Oh, no. YouTube commenters, people watching on the stream right now, we need your feedback.
I am used to you being on the left side of the screen, though.
It is weird.
Yeah.
We're going to try it for the rest of this segment. We're going to take, can I do a poll on here? Is that a thing? I thought there was a poll feature. Start a poll.
There you go.
Should we keep Craig on the right? Yes or no? Start poll. There we go. I almost just made a joke that would have potentially got me in a lot of trouble. I'm just going to keep it moving. Thank God Josh Harris is the owner of the Commanders now, That's my takeaway from the last segment. God, man, it is wild to think that, like, imagine having a team. And I'll tell you what, I think about with Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. There's this clip that was going around of Jerry a couple weeks ago doing just this incredible acting job. I can't remember what show it's from. For some reason, I want to say Yellowstone, but I don't think it was actually Yellowstone. But Jerry was like giving this speech about how amazing it was to like work with his kids. Like, why, people talk about, oh, I lost this to my kids, or I lost this to work. I didn't get to spend time with my kids. Well, I brought my kids into work, and now I never have to regret not spending time with, like, it was actually like a really beautiful sentiment. And Jerry absolutely crushed the delivery of it. And people were like, oh my God, I didn't know Jerry had that kind of acting chops. And I watched it and I was like, this is actually like a genuinely beautiful sentiment, but also I don't think he's acting. I think they told Jerry, go walk in there and tell these two fellas with all the cameras and lights around your life story. And Jerry was like, oh, I'm going to go do it. And he delivers that monologue, and he just goes on talking about his family and talking about, and it's great, it's potent, it's powerful, it's authentic, because that's actually how he feels. But I also cannot imagine doing that and all being like, I taught my kids the family business, and I get to spend time with them because we get to do this stuff together, and doing it so freaking poorly. Taking this thing that is worth so much and means so much to so many people and just not really seeming to care, or certainly not, because Jerry, if you told Jerry Jones, hey man, it doesn't look like you care about the Cowboys. I care about the Cowboys more than I care about anything else my whole life. Cowboys are my whole life. I got a star tattoo on my butt. I was just seeing if you were paying attention, Anthony. You were.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were. You were paying attention. But he doesn't care enough to hire the smartest people. He doesn't care enough to spend the money that it takes. And that star has made him every cent he owns. And he's like, I don't want to pay too much for a head coach. There's no salary cap on a head coach. Why would you want to pay the literal most you could? Not the literal most. You want to, obviously, you don't want to just pay guys for the sake of paying them. But, why would the cost be the limiting factor? That's what I'm trying to say. On head coach, if you truly care about winning. But he doesn't seem to. And I just can't imagine, one, an owner whose priorities seem to be so out of place. And two, one who seems so wholly inadequate and incapable of hiring the right people to fix the problems. Like the idea to Jerry that he's like, I am the GM. I didn't buy the team to whatever. But, and if that's how you want to run your oil business or whatever, that's fine. Ultimately, you got customers and stuff that you need to take care of, or they're not going to buy your product. But that's the thing is, in the NFL, the customers are still going to buy the product. And you have to treat it like a public trust. And he just doesn't. It's his play toy. It's for him to run into the ground or not. And it's a damn shame because Cowboys fans are loyal and dedicated. That much we know, Anthony.
You're missing one.
What's
delusional?
Yeah. I think the delusion is wearing off, though, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Well, it is and it isn't. They know they're not good now.
Do they?
That's because they are fed up with Jerry.
Okay.
So Jerry's ineptitude is pulled away at their delusion.
Okay. Good.
But I have faith it'll come back eventually. Who knows? Maybe it works out. We always say, coordinator and head coach, a different job. Maybe Brian Schottenheimer's better suited as a head coach than he is an OC. And they do have Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons. Also, a really good chance they fall flat on their face because they ain't that good. So we'll see. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I'm already getting more used to being on the right side, Anthony. I'm not going to lie. It's already.
Where does the poll stand right now?
I'll check it. I'll check it next. And then after that, we will. Actually, I'll check it now. Because coming up next, we're going to play for you yes, 89%. Is 89% to 11%. I should stay on the right side.
It means 8-1 currently.
Yeah, that's how the percents work. So we'll continue that poll as we go. I don't remember what side I sat down next to Sidney Johnson on, but my interview with the Mystics head coach is next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Earlier today, went up to Capital One Arena, District E, where the Mystics introduced Jamila Weideman and Sydney Johnson. Jamila, the new general manager of the team. Sydney, the new head coach. Both interviews will be up on the Hoffman W Sports YouTube page soon. Actually, Sydney is basically up now. I need to hit like 3 more buttons. And then Jamila will be up a little bit later this afternoon as well. We'll also put both in audio form in our podcast feed. But for the Sydney Johnson interview, you don't have to do anything but keep on listening, because my chat with the new Mystics head coach is here for you right now. With Mystics' new head coach, Sydney Johnson, you getting used to being introduced like that? I'm like your 10th interview in a row here.
Yeah,
so.
I like the ring. I like the ring of that. So I'm well suited for it.
Indeed, indeed. Well, first of all, welcome, I guess, back to D.C.
Yeah,
The DMV, as you mentioned in the press conference, this is home for you.
Yep.
What's it mean to not just coach a WNBA team, but coach this WNBA team for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've followed DC sports, and just being down the road, in Towson, and all that's going on in the DMV, and as I mentioned, the players, the coaches, the teams that have come out of this area, and so to have an opportunity to lead the Mystics in their next, and listen, there is already a legacy there. There's been a championship. There's been some winning games. We want to help in terms of establish a year in and year out winner, and also have an experience that our players can be unbelievably proud of, and frankly thrive in. So to have that opportunity, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Michael and Jamila and yourself talked about that 90-10 split. So for folks that have seen the press conference, they already know that. No need to re-explain to the audience. But you are most directly responsible day to day for the 10%. How do you approach that, knowing that the 90% is so important to what you're doing, but your 10% is what they ultimately keep score on?
Yeah, I'll say this, why I want to be a part of the Mystics in our organization, we're all going to play a role in that 90%, and that's it's so profound. It touches every single one of us, and our players being at the center of it. 1,000% we want to win basketball games. And, the New York Liberty are really good. The Minnesota Lynx are really good. We understand the challenge. It's in front of us. We believe that an experience that our players want to be a part of. We believe in DC and what we have to draw. We believe in the style of play that we're looking to embrace, that we will be able to add to the very good players that we have now. Get them on the court and build something special that can go up against those teams. So we understand what's in front of us, but I do believe that we're up for it.
I think one of the things that's fascinating about the current state of the W is there are so many different styles of play. And part of that is influences. You have coaches coming in from overseas. You have coaches coming in from college. You have coaches from the NBA or the W that have come up through the ranks. You also have teams that are built more perimeter-oriented that have been very good. Vegas, obviously, a 2-time champ. Everything is centered around Asia, who's a post player.
Yep.
That could be, I would imagine, both very exciting and also very terrifying as a head coach. So how do you think about building a style looking at both the current roster and something that is sustainable over time?
Yeah, it's more exciting in the film room, as you're trying to do the X's and O's, and then it's terrifying when game day shows up, because ultimately, and just respectfully to all my colleagues, there's some really good coaches. At the end of the day, players make it happen. And when you have the challenge of having to deal with Asia or Brianna or Fee or take your pick, that's when it really kicks in. So for me, I think it's about putting a staff together that can support our players, to have a system that causes some headaches for some other people. And some of that will come in terms of diversity of play. But ultimately, we got to find a way to slow down really, really good players. And we also got to find a way to put our best players in the best situation. That's what it will come down to.
So with that in mind, are you scrapping every plan you had and just going to say, hey, let's get Aaliyah isolated, let her play one-on-one, considering what she's doing down in Miami?
I wish it was that easy, And,
she's making it look that easy now, Coach. You got to overcomplicate it.
She is, but there'll be 4 other players and 5 other defenders or 4 other defenders. But ultimately, that is showing her growth and development. and expanding her versatility. And at the end of the day, that's what you want to have as a player. You want those minutes. You want to be able to show value towards winning. And that's the one thing in talking to Aaliyah that I love about her already. She cares about winning.
Oh, yeah.
Winning. And that's, as you talk about that 10%, that's what you need to have that drive.
The competitiveness, I mean, just oozing out of her. I mean, she was upset last night. As we sit here on Wednesday, the game last night. Like, she won, but she wasn't happy with how that game went down. And competitive, as you can just see it oozing out of her. I think for a coach in any sport, but especially in basketball, and especially when you're talking in the terms that your group is talking in, of letting the individual shine, there is ultimately this balance between creativity and structure.
Yeah.
If I frame it that way to you, how do you think about that balance?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I do think there's some non-negotiables in terms of how we want to be. We do need to play hard. We can't really cut corners on that. Nothing's going to come our way that we are even dreaming about if we're not putting the work in, if we're not competitive, if we're not trying to do it together. So there are some non-negotiables in that sense. And I'm not so comfortable phrasing it like that, but just some standards and ways that we want to be. Along the way, there's tons of time not only to be yourself, but to inform me. Hey, coach, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Hey, this might be a better player for her because she likes coming off of her left instead of her right. Things like that. That's what I want our players to, be able to have in me, and frankly from an organization standpoint as well when we talk about their care and development away from the game. So all of that will be included. But yeah, we're going to hold to some standards because at the end of the day, it's a team game towards a single goal, and we have to have a North Star. We have to have something guiding us, and that will require some sacrifice towards how we want to play in order to get there.
How much time have you spent both as a head coach in the men's college side when you were at Fairfield, or as a player? I mean, you were 3-time captain at Princeton, which is pretty neat. Only one in school history. So I'm sure you've spent a lot of time thinking about leadership and messaging, and you've been in front of rooms before. So when you talk about that North Star, I mean, I spend obviously, I love covering the hoops. We spend a lot of time on the radio talking about the Commanders. And so watching the leadership and how Dan Quinn had these sayings this year, I thought was a really fascinating experience for me covering probably the most successful team that I've certainly covered on the football side of it the decade that I've been in D.C.
Right.
So do you have some of those things, whether it's, call it a mantra, a saying, a philosophy that for you is ultimately that North Star?
Yeah, it's I think for me, it's really about, this is what I really do think that we want to love each other in a sense of a humility and thirst of working together as a team. It's really hard to build something special if we don't even, want to work together. If we don't even have the humility to say, okay, you're going to want a little bit of this, I'm going to want a little bit of that, this, how can we come together to make it happen as a tandem, and then as a trio, and then 4 and 5. So you got to start somewhere. And I think an equal balance of competitiveness and humility is where we have to start. And that's always been something that I've championed. That's always been something that I've led with and honestly demanded from my teams. And I expect to do the same here with the Mystics.
So the experience you had last year in Chicago, I thought was really interesting to watch that team come together. A lot of obviously notoriety around Angel coming out with LSU, but I think more specific to her as a player, the thing that is fascinating to me is how well her game translated from the college game to the pro game. Right. And I think, obviously, traditionally in this league, rookies have had a terrible time. It's the hardest league. I think it might be the hardest league in all of sports to translate from college to the pro.
Even to make a roster.
Exactly.
I mean, it's nuts. The competitiveness to just get on the roster. But,
Yeah, so, it's 144 players. It's so hard. But seeing now not only what Angel did, you had a front row seat to Camilla, obviously a little bit more of an up and down year because of the injuries. It's so much, take the hardness that it is, multiply it times injuries. But what Caitlin did and what I think is going to happen with some of the newer players coming in is the game has just got more investment at the youth levels, more advanced players by the time they get to college. How does that change how you think about what this current group is capable of with some of the younger players, but also how quick the pivot can be back towards the top of the league?
Yeah, really, really good question. I think, and that includes the last part of your question also includes the fact that, we're going through, CBA renegotiation. And so, a whole new fresh wave of free agency is going to kick in a year from now. So the ability to change a team quickly through that process, through, player development for sure, and then to your point, to add rookies who can come onto your team and make an impact, we're tracking all of it. We're just literally tracking all of it, and a greater importance or significance in that kind of potential rookie tracking because of the stories that you just mentioned, that there are some players that can come in, not only make your roster, but be rotation starters. Angel was an all-star. So those standards now have changed, so we have to be mindful and set an environment where, you have good vets around, rookies to come in, they can learn from and focus on ball and help them settle in. There's a whole lot to it, but that's increasingly a part of the puzzle that we're putting together.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, you talked about a lot of different things up at the podium, and you obviously had tremendous gratitude as you thanked all different people in your life, and you're talking about answering different basketball questions. I think the most animated you were when you talked to us directly about telling the stories of these players. Why does that hit such an important point for you?
It's all about the players, man. It hits home. I'm getting animated even now, wanting to go there because the amount of sacrifice that these athletes put in, everything I just talked about, sacrificing some part of their individual for the team, but then also being able to show up, fully on and off the court. But they give so much. They're giving so much to this game, and we are winning by just being able to watch it and soak it in. Tell those stories. Like, don't take it for granted. Don't overlook it. Like why there isn't a Netflix series on BG and everything that I don't understand. And Netflix does a really good job. All right,
yeah.
You guys.
Let's go Netflix.
Exactly. Like all those things. I'm tuned to. Why aren't we having some of those stories being told, on the W players and everything that they've gone through and they've meant in this society in this moment? We can amplify that more, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan of them. So I see it, in terms of how much they're giving, and I want us to give as much back, if not more.
How do you as a coach, obviously, you learning a player's story is different than me learning and telling a player's story, but if you want to have that connection with the individuals, you have to learn their stories. It sounds like you're very familiar with some of them. How do you go about that process over the next few months of learning your players' stories?
Proximity. That's what it is. It's just time. There's no shortcuts to it. I don't know Diamond DeShields any better than the next person by, Googling it. Been in the gym with her, and sat down and had moments. She's given me books to read. I've given her books to read. It's just like stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's just proximity. And I also say this as a coach, I can be really, really, really good when a player lets me in. When a good player lets me in, I can be a great coach. I'm not saying the onus is on them, but there is a vulnerability. There is a willingness to say, hey, I trust this guy. And when they have, I feel fulfilled, but I also feel like I've helped them get to some places maybe that they couldn't have got on their own. So, and that all comes with proximity.
Sadie Johnson, new head coach of the Washington Mystics. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And look forward to telling your story and your players' stories this season. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, did you see the look on my face as I was like, whoa, as I prepared to bring us out a break there?
I did not.
Oh, I right before I obviously pulled up the 2-shot to switch over on the video feed, and I forgot that I had switched our sides of the screen. And I was like, what am I doing over there?
So you're still adjusting to it. That's all.
Still adjusting. But the poll question says it's here to stay.
Ooh, okay.
So apparently I live here now, and Anthony lives over there. All right. Anthony, do you remember this summer when the worst people on the internet were going out of their way to defend Caitlin Clark because the mean girls of the WNBA were pushing her, or whatever they said that was happening?
Yeah.
How many of those same people do you think were watching the Unrivaled one-on-one tournament last night?
Maybe not as many as we probably will hope.
Certainly that. I hope every single one of them that feels like the dumbest person on the planet. And I say that genuinely. Oh, God, Petty Craig is coming out. Yeah, he's here to stay.
It's the new haircut, man.
Maybe. It was kind of funny. The interview with Sydney that we just played was before my haircut, and then I went and got the haircut after. So that's people can see the order of operations of my day if they've watched the show. But I sincerely hope that if you were new to women's basketball, and this is my sincere hope. This is not the petty hope. The sincere hope is that if you were new to women's basketball and felt the need to speak up on behalf, big air quotes, of Caitlin Clark and defend her because you thought they were targeting her or whatever, that you actually fell in love with the game and you were watching last night and you think back to the things that you said this summer and you went, yeah, I was wrong. The pettier side of me says, I hope you feel like a big dumb idiot. Because watching those girls, those women, those grown-ass athletic humans get after it one-on-one like they were playing one-on-one prison rules in the backyard or the front yard or at the park or wherever. Oh, my God, the physicality that they showed. And it's important to remember, like, these women are like, I mean, Aaliyah Edwards, for instance, who was banging last night. Offensively, defensively, the physicality in her matchup, crazy as she advances to the semifinals of Unrivaled's one-on-one tournament. She is like 6'3". That is a big, big human with huge amounts of force generated because of, force equals mass times acceleration. When you're 6'3", you got some mass that you can throw around and just absolutely batter people. And even if you're maybe not 6'3", and you're however tall Dejanay Carrington is, 5'8", and this is the one that made me think of the Caitlin thing, right? Because, Dejanay had the one play that was total accident where she poked Caitlin in the eye, and a certain section of the internet absolutely lost their mind because Dejanay had gotten physical with Caitlin earlier in the season. And like, physical in an illegal basketball sense, yes, and fouls were called, but also, like, that's basketball sometimes. It's really physical. Yo, Dejanay, was it her and Ryan Howard?
No, it was her and Satu.
Oh, that's who it was. It was Satu. I watched, like, all the matchups last night, and so they're all scrambled in my head, so I apologize for not keeping everybody straight. Dude, but especially her and Satu, because Satu's, like, 6'3", 6'4".
Physical specimen as well.
And is built. And Dejanay Carrington is just like, I have one way that this can go. I am going to try to batter the hell out of Satu Sabali. And that matchup, the physicality in it, and it's something that I think is so underrated in, I think actually in sports in general. I was going to say specifically in women's sports, and I think it is because there's a certain sect of people that are like, oh, they're women. They can't push that hard. And it's like, yo, they would body your ass off the court, Mr. 5'8" account manager at whatever firm. Like, congrats on your bicep curls that you do at the gym and have been doing the same weight for 5 years. Like, these girls would destroy you. And that physicality, I think in general, though, like, you go sit courtside in an NBA game, even the NFL. I do not think people understand how physical the NFL is. NFL films can do it only so much justice. Television, like we are numb to it on television because we see it all the time. If I could take the average NFL fan and have them watch a game from the sidelines and see the physicality of offensive and defensive line play, even the physicality of getting off a jam at the line of scrimmage, that is something that is super easy. I think it would blow the average person's mind. And I remember the first time I sat field side at Audi for a Spirit game. And it was a matchup where it was Washington versus Orlando. Alex Morgan was playing for Orlando. And there was a shot that Alex took in that game where Alex was like down in tears because she thought she broke her ribs. She got hit so hard. But even just like the speed and physicality of watching those women run by is just insane. The contact level. But even for that, this unrivaled one-on-one tournament is like, it's on another level. Like, this isn't a commentary on just the average person doesn't understand the physicality of professional sports because it's hard to fathom. This translated to television. This translated to, I'm watching it and we're texting back and forth, Anthony, and it's like, these girls are trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Nah, it was definitely something we want. Like, you don't want to see a lot of fouls called. Even when we naturally just watch basketball, like we want to see, the refs let people play, not the refs, steal the show and try to.
When they let them play.
Yeah, and it was something that I think we'll all appreciate. And I think just going back to the point about how physical they were with Kaylin, she's a rookie. Welcome to the league.
Right.
Welcome to the league.
And it wasn't. I think the biggest thing is, it wasn't special to her. And that was the point all along. Not that it wasn't physical, not that she wasn't getting beaten up a little bit, but like she was a rookie, she was new to the league, and she's a great perimeter player.
Yeah.
I saw an ESPN list this sometime point in the last couple of weeks that they had her as like the second or I think the third or fourth best player in the entire league.
Yep.
Like Caitlin is legit, and obviously she got even more legit as last year went on, but as she was adjusting to the lead, the speed and physicality was the biggest adjustment for her. And so, yeah, they targeted her because it was a way to defend her and slow her down, and that league allows a lot of physicality in the refereeing. But it wasn't special to her. It just looked less natural because she wasn't used to it. So these other guards that are receiving the same amount of physicality, it just bounce off it better because Caitlin wasn't adjusted yet. Then Caitlin adjusted, and she started killing everybody.
Yeah.
But I think what I appreciated, Caitlin started doing this some last year where she would push back a little bit more. She would get physical. I think my favorite moment outside of Aaliyah winning last night and advancing to the semifinals, Shakira Austin put up a valiant effort, but she went down after she had her own first-round upset on Monday. But outside of that was watching Queen Fee, watching Nafisa Collier, who played – who did she have? I think it was Courtney Williams.
Yeah, she had Courtney Williams.
Yo, Courtney, her first matchup, she went ham. Terms of physicality, which if you know Courtney Williams, like of course she did. But here you have like the second or the runner-up to MVP, one of the best players in the league, in the WNBA, the co-founder of the league, and she's going against the ultimate junkyard dog in Courtney Williams. And Courtney Williams is up in her grill, like she's ready to go. And Fee knows it's coming and just takes the physicality to her. And then when she missed a shot eventually and Courtney had the ball, she's right up there on Courtney Williams, the same as she's like, you want to play junkyard dog? Watch this.
I'm here too.
I'm here too. Like, it was awesome. Semifinals are Friday if you want to watch it. But I sincerely hope that for anyone who was like, oh my God, they were so mean to Caitlin, go watch that back. That's what professional basketball is. And it was on full display last night in Miami. When we get back, Dave Johnson joins us. Speaking of professional basketball, the Wizards and Pacers play tonight. Final game for the All-Star break. We check in with Dave one more time. Next on the Team 980.
George, 3 on the clock for 3. It's there.
Feel like busting loose, busting loose.
Crossover, step back 3. Oh, Jordan Poole, you are cool.
Feel like busting loose now.
On the Hoffman Show.
It is just after 6 o'clock on a Wizards game day, and we head live to Capital One Arena, where I was earlier today for the Mystics introductory press conference. But the broadcast booth, about as far away as you can get from District D, Dave Johnson, is where we find you. How you doing?
Doing well, and you know, it's at last day of school before break, but I don't think this team is looking at a vacation. Again, it's what we talked about. I was telling somebody else about this young team. They are just stoked every night to be in the NBA, and that's why, look, against Cleveland, against Atlanta, against San Antonio, they had chances to win. The better team in the end prevailed on those nights, but you know, tonight they'd like to trip up the Pacers and go into the break feeling good.
No doubt about it. Are we going to see Alex Sarr tonight? Okay, that's good,
yes.
And that means I guess we're going to see him this weekend as well?
Yes. He, you know, again, this is the situation where obviously with the Wizards record where it is, you don't have to rush players back. You can get them back where they're fully healthy. And so, you know, he's been out. He missed 8 games with the left ankle sprain, and I didn't think he was going to miss that many. But they, you know, just want to make sure you're perfectly healthy. There's no need to you know, risk injury in a season where you're you know, obviously not battling for a playoff spot. You know, it's the same situation. We're not, as we told you straight out, that Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart would not be part of the Wizards on the floor anyway until after the All-Star break, because they want to get them fully healthy. You know, there's not the sense of urgency. I'll hurry them back to the court because, you know, we're losing ground in the standings. That's not where this team is right now.
Dave Johnson joining us from the broadcast booth at Capital One Arena ahead of Wizards and Pacers tonight. Dave, what did you see from Tristan Vukcevic on Monday? Obviously had that crazy good end to the first quarter and ultimately leads the Wizards in scoring. And again, in the season of discovery, if they can turn a second-round pick into a rotation player, like that is a good second-round pick, and it seems like the Wizards might be onto something here.
There's no shortage of young players that were, and when they get opportunities, they perform. And again, when you think about, obviously last night stood out with the season high 18, but you know, because of the trade of Jonas Valanciunas, you know, he was getting more playing time, and he was producing. And quite frankly, we talked to Brian Keefe before the game about him because he was coming off a good game against the Atlanta Hawks. So a good stretch of games, really, if you look at what he was producing in the minutes he was playing. But, you know, he's the prototypical stretch 4. And you know, because of injury, he only appeared in 13 games this year. So I think you saw the result of he's got his rhythm back. And it's the flashes we saw last year. And again, he does that with you know, Victor Wembanyama, Mr. Shot Blocker, and the Spurs in town. And he went out Wemby a couple times. But the fact that he can stretch the floor and hit that 3-point shot with the regularity he can do, he is the type of player that can find a place in the NBA. And the Wizards, you know, he's got all the confidence in the world, having already played in Europe even at his young age. So, you know, this is why it's going to be fun. It is fun right now. And this is not PR spin, but, you know, I said the statement about the game against the Hawks. Bub Carrington took over that game. That's a rookie. Rookies don't typically take over games. You could just see the confidence in a Bilal Coulibaly bursting through his chest. Oh, Bilal, by the way, you're going to be on Tyrese Halliburton tonight, for example. Or, you know, this is night in and night out. You do this for 82 games. It's benefiting you now, and it's going to benefit this Wizards team in the future. And as we go into the All-Star break, yeah, we should be celebrated that there's 3 players at the Rising Stars game. I mean, that is significant and an example of how this team is drafted well, and one that did make it, I think will be there in the future. Keshawn George, since the turn of the year, and I don't know exactly when, but you know, around that period of time, you know, his consistency is upgraded. He went through a stretch of 6 straight games where he made at least 2 3-pointers. You know, his ability on defense, you know, his athleticism. So it's exciting times when you're looking at all these guys and thinking, wow, there's it's not just one guy the Wizards are hanging their hat on. There's a lot going on here, and how is this going to crystallize and come into focus? And that's what's going to make the next 30 games after we get back from the break interesting.
For sure. Dave Johnson with us from Capital One Arena. What do you think, or how do you think that the post-All-Star break Wizards look different from the pre-All-Star break Wizards? And, the break is a chance for BK and the staff and Will and Michael, if they want to get in on it, and whoever else in the front office to kind of get together, say, all right, we've done all this experimenting. Are there any that we want to go back to and say, all right, we like this little taste that we got on this random night in December? What if we did that with more intention? And obviously you have Marcus and Chris coming into the fold. What do you expect for how this team, this franchise uses the final 30 games to set up another Will Dawkins jump season, to use one of his pet phrases?
That's a good question. You think about last year at this time, they made the decision to bring Jordan Poole off the bench to put him in a better chance to succeed. And of course he did and was more successful. And then with Tyus Jones getting injured, he became a starter and really has not looked back since in terms of the second half of last year carrying over into this year. So I don't know if I have a specific answer, just because I've not talked to Will or Michael about that, but I think you bring up a couple of points. Okay, they want to get Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart involved. I do think Bilal Coulibaly is showing that look, it's obvious there's no Kyle Kuzma here anymore, so he can continue to expand his role, and I think the Wizards have seen success when he has an expanded role and expanded usage rate. I think it's also worth noting that this team is getting better as a defensive team. The last 10 games, they're ranked 20th in field goal percentage defense. Now, obviously that's not number one, but see, that's an improvement. That's a metric you can point to and say, all right, now the Wizards are a top 20 defensive team. If you look at that particular metric and that number, can that get better over the next 30 games to really close this season strong? When as much as we talked about individual development, this wanted to be a team that is a better defensive team. And, top 20 is a significant, when you think about the top 16 teams make the playoffs. So in other words, that now suddenly you're talking about having a playoff-like defense, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I think, what I will be encouraged to look for is how they integrate Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton, because they're character guys also like Malcolm Brogdon. We see the difference in how this Wizards team is able to play when Malcolm Brogdon's healthy. Look, it was no coincidence that he comes back and the Wizards rattle off 3 wins in a row. I'm not saying they have to have him to win. It's an impact on the court that goes beyond the numbers. So, this team is not going to make the playoff. We knew that going in. But did you want to see a team getting to March and April looking better than the team that started the season? And I would suggest that there's numbers to indicate that's the case. But more importantly, the eye test, and quite frankly, that includes the 3 players going to the Rising Stars weekend. Not that I'm trying to keep coming back to that, but you want to be, if you're a fan of the Wizards, you want to say, you know what, we do have a young class that's getting recognized around the league. You don't want the other side of the equation, obviously, like, wow, nobody's paying attention because they're not performing. But, when a players come up to Bub Carrington and saying, they're changing the scouting report because of him. He's a rookie. But teams are adjusting their scouting reports based on how these rookies are progressing. So, to me, that's proof that yes, you'd like to win more than 9 games because we all like to win, but it's proof there's something going on here.
Dave Johnson, you can hear him and Glenn on the call tonight, about 30 minutes away from our pregame coverage here on the Team 980. And then, Dave, nice little break for you. Do anything, any fun, relaxing, or are you just going to, do some laundry and enjoy not being on the road?
No, you know what? I'm not kidding. After tonight's game, I'm driving to Ocean City, and I'm just going to stare at the waves for
Beautiful.
7 days and just chill out, because the beach is a wonderful time the winter is a wonderful time at the beach.
I love that for you.
Yeah,
Enjoy the break. Right. We'll talk to you when you get back, well rested, well deserved stretch off here for you, sir. And we appreciate your time as always here on the show.
But thanks to the free Odyssey app, I can still keep up with the Hoffman.
Hey now.
So there we go.
Appreciate it. All right, that's Dave Johnson with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, huge night for someone DMV relative in the hoops world last night. Kevin Durant passes the 30,000 point mark. We will talk about that. But first, the latest on the world in women's sports, or latest in the world of women's sports, he said. It's presented to you by Wawa. Chicken how you wanna at Wawa with customizable crispy or roasted chicken sandwiches. About 25 minutes left here in this edition of the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we're willing to send you to Las Vegas. All you got to do is listen. If you're ready to win big and live it up in Sin City, we've got the Slam Dunk in Vegas on the Team 980. Listen for your chance to win a flyaway trip to Las Vegas with 3 friends and $20,000 in spending money for the first 2 rounds of the college basketball tournament. You'll stay at the Circa Resort and Casino, Las Vegas's premier sports viewing destination, and visit the biggest March Hoops party at Stadium Swim. Winning is easy. Just download the free Odyssey app, log in, and listen to the Team 980 for a chance to win the experience of a lifetime. Listen each day for an hour to earn your daily entry. This is a national contest. More details are available at odyssey.com/slamdunk. Last night, I actually didn't see the highlight, Anthony. How did Kevin Durant score his 30,000th point in the NBA?
I didn't see the highlight either.
Well, what a great discussion we're about to have about it. The good thing is I think the discussion is a lot more about Kevin Durant, 30,000 points, as opposed to Kevin Durant, 30,000th point.
I will say, I think
30,000th point? How?
30,000th point.
Thank you. What just happened to my brain?
I don't know. Sometimes we slip up on this show.
I might need to switch sides of the screen back. I don't think I'm
that's what
smart
you're
over
calling
here.
it?
I
Okay.
don't know if I'm as good on this side of the screen.
Craig, what's 3 times 3?
9.
Okay. The maths.
The maths. Whoa. What were you going to say?
I think KD actually had a pull-up, though, and then they called a timeout, and they gave him a standing ovation. I saw all of that.
Yeah, I know Ja gave him the game ball at the end. But yeah. I was thinking about this in the break because obviously we're about to talk about it. PG County's very own. Kevin Durant, one of the greatest scorers in the history of the league. If you play his career out 20 times, I feel like the version that's happened is like, this is like the 13th or 14th best version of his career, which is crazy because he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and is awesome. Like, that's how good Kevin Durant is. I'm just like, what happens if, like, think of some of the stuff he's had to deal with and then maybe some of the problems he has created for himself. First of all, he's drafted to Seattle and they moved to Oklahoma City. What if he just plays his career in Seattle? Much bigger market. Maybe he's happier there longer. Maybe not. Maybe he ultimately has the desire to move. But, like, certainly being in Oklahoma City versus Seattle, I mean, they did as well as you possibly can in Oklahoma City. In terms of new franchise, got to build the infrastructure, like literal infrastructure, practice facilities, whatever. And then they do an incredible job drafting. They've got him, they've got Russ, they've got Harden. They make the run to the 2012 finals. But then, again, so thing one, moves from Seattle to Oklahoma City. All due respect to OKC. Fine little town. Fine medium-sized American city. I mean, little town. That was very coastal elite of me. Then Sam Presti, one of the best general managers in the sport, makes this inexplicable/inexcusable trade for James Harden, where he trades away Harden a year early. And they're like, oh, you just went to the finals. Just run it back. Run it back one more time. And you could have paid Harden. You could have traded him at the trade deadline if things were going sideways. You could have traded him in the next offseason. You had 2 years remaining on Harden's contract. You had just gone to the finals with a bunch of 21 and 22 and 23-year-olds, and they trade James Harden. So really what I'm talking about here is more of KD's, like, championship count, right?
Mm-hmm.
Game 6 Clay happens to him. They were up 3-1 in that series. And then the Warriors do a ridiculous thing. Now, of course, that is probably the impetus for him to leave and join the Warriors. So he gets the championships that he's got in part because of what happens to him. So I don't know how you want to math that math. But then you have then it becomes the question of, like, how much do you fault him for choosing Kyrie as his next running mate? Like, when he leaves Golden State and he's got the steadiness of Steph Curry and he's like, I know who I want to partner with. Kyrie Irving, famously steady, not at all a wild card. Not someone who tends to blow things up at the most unexpected of times. And he chooses Kyrie as his running mate. Things go way sideways in Brooklyn. Obviously, eventually gets to Phoenix. they decide to, for whatever godforsaken reason, to make the Bradley Beal deal. They could have done other things with Chris Paul if they decide that that's not working, but they ultimately decide to make the Beal deal of all deals. And now he can't get out of Phoenix, and they can't get Beal out of Phoenix because Brad's got the no trade clause. So he blew up their entire trade deadline. And now Kevin is more or less stuck with Bradley Beal in Phoenix. And unless Devin Booker reverts into or refigures his career into being like a top 6 player in the league, it feels like Durant's championship window is closed. So we got 2 in Golden State, got a Finals MVP. He certainly had an unbelievable career individually. But I do think for a player as great as he is, what a wild and wacky career he's had. And most of the things I just said aren't things that he could have controlled. And that not even like he came down on someone's foot, rolled an ankle, couldn't control it. Like big, giant organizational stuff, or even whatever you call a franchise moving cities that he couldn't control.
Yeah, I mean, granted, his career definitely could have gone better, but I think what's just been consistent no matter wherever he's gone, he just always been about a bucket, man. Always been about a bucket. And I forgot who I was having this conversation with, but when you just look at the things he can do at 7 feet, I don't necessarily know if I should call him the greatest scorer ever just because he can do a myriad of things. Post up, get to the basket, get your hesitation. The three is there.
Here's how I would answer that question. I'll answer your question with a question. If you need to pick any player in their prime in the history of the NBA to get you 1 bucket in an ISO situation, I'm going to get you the ball on the wing or at the top and clear out, and you got to get me 1 bucket. How many dudes are you taking over Durant? I feel like you could obviously make an MJ argument because he's Michael Jordan and the will that he had. If you wanted to make a LeBron argument, I mean, LeBron in his prime, certainly enough to convince you, Mr. LeBron stan, of LeBron, even though we think of him as much more than a scorer because he is, but like he's the NBA's all-time leading scorer.
Yeah.
You tell me I got 1 bucket, I can get a Kareem skyhook. It's hard to pass
Shaq
up.
on the block, maybe.
Yeah, Shaq on the block, maybe. But if the ball's on the perimeter, certainly.
Yeah, you got 3 dribbles, 4 dribbles maybe.
I don't know how many dudes you're taking over Durant.
I don't need.
And I can make an argument for Durant over all the dudes I just said. And the argument is he's 7 feet tall with a great handle. His shot is unblockable, and he's got 30-foot range.
Yeah.
What's your argument?
I don't think I have a counter.
Right. And that's how you get to 30K.
I will say there is one person that I am considering, though. When we talk about just
I'm open to it. The funny thing is, I'm not actually the biggest KD guy.
Okay.
I have a ton of respect for the guy.
Okay.
I will not diminish his scoring prowess, but I think that part of the reason that why I went the direction I did is because I think that there's things about his personality and the way that he's done it over the years where he's a little laissez-faire at times.
Yeah.
Where he's just like, okay, whatever happens, happens. And I think that other superstars that have won more perhaps have a bigger impact on their team's culture and kind of how business is done. Not necessarily as LeBron catches some flack for being GM LeBron, but the day-to-day of the Golden State Warriors building is trying to keep up with Steph Curry. Yeah. I don't know that Durant has that impact on a building. And certainly since he left Oklahoma City, where that was different because it's was his building.
Or where he demands it kind of thing.
Right. Where LeBron has traveled, the Heat was a different deal. It's Heat culture. But when he came back to Cleveland, he set that tone. And when he went to LA, he sets that tone. But who's your guy that you would consider over Durant?
I don't know if I would consider him over him, but I will have him up there. And this, you might not like it, but Kyrie Irving is one of the best scorers to
no, 100%
basketball, man.
Well, it's kind of like if you have I think if you're going to do the NBA one-on-one tournament, Durant has to be one of the favorites because of his size.
Yeah.
Kyrie is way higher on the favorites list than he should be for a guy who's 6'1", because if you tell him he gets to shoot for ball, he makes it, and then you might not ever get to actually have an offensive possession.
Yeah.
Kyrie, no, look, Kyrie did some really dumb stuff a couple years ago, said some really dumb stuff, has occasionally done really dumb stuff. Kyrie, I think part of the reason I was so frustrated with Kyrie a couple years ago is because, like, the people that I know in basketball circles that know Kyrie will tell you he's a really sweet guy whose heart's in the right place. And I actually don't disbelieve that. I think he just got sidetracked by some weird internet stuff.
Yeah.
And I also absolutely will not disrespect Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, because he's one of my favorite players to watch. Yeah. There are certain athletes that are like, that's a fun conversation. There's like two other guys that I'm trying to think of in my head of like, I absolutely cannot stand them off the court, and Kyrie's not at that level. But there's one in particular who is the ultimate, cannot stand him off the court, which sucks because I adore watching them play their sport.
Yeah.
We'll do that and real things to wrap up the show next. All right, wrapping up the show with a silly discussion. Athletes that you love to watch play, but you know something about them off the court or off the field, or just their personality in general that you're just like, I can't do this. Andy, do you have any, or is this just going to be Petty Craig being a hater over here? Not even a hater. Some of these people deserve it.
People whose game I respect, but
you're like, man, I love that person, or I love watching that player play, and then you learn some more about him, and you're like, ugh.
I'm sure there's at least one or two. Actually, nah. I'm sure there's one or two. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now.
I'll hit you with my number one in this category. This starting, we were talking about Kyrie Irving, and Kyrie is like a light version of this category for me, but for reasons that we discussed in the last segment. Aaron Rodgers is the ultimate. Aaron Rodgers, at the peak of his powers, was probably my favorite quarterback in the NFL. I loved watching that dude play. The command he had, the style, the flair, the cockiness. Honestly, I found him often on some things very, very thoughtful. And then he just got down like the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories on the internet, became totally self-absorbed. Like I don't want to say what I was about to say because I feel like I could get sued for something. But like, I would not be surprised if eventually we learned that Aaron Rodgers had some CTE. And I don't say that like meanly or flippantly. Just it feels like something happened to that dude, and he just went way off the deep end. And then obviously he also became way less enjoyable to watch as a football player because he tore his Achilles and got old, and that's a bad combination. But Aaron Rodgers went from one of my absolute favorite players in the NFL to that guy sucks so hard. So he's my number one on that list. And he's kind of in a category on his own, I think, in terms of the distance between enjoyment of play and just cannot stand him as a person. You know who's actually entering a little bit of that category? There's and this I feel like is happening nationally. Pat Mahomes. I think there's some Pat Mahomes stuff that's starting to get kind of annoying with the way he answers certain questions or does certain things. Although I think a lot more of that is about some of the people around Pat Mahomes, depending on how you feel politically, like about his wife. His brother is a terrible person. That is a non-negotiable. Yeah. His brother absolutely sucks. But like, dude, as a quarterback, he's still Pat. Like, he's still the guy that runs around and does the crazy stuff. And like, how can you not enjoy watching that dude play unless you just can't stand Pat Mahomes? And I feel like there's more and more people that are like, I can't stand Pat Mahomes.
Yeah, but is that more so due to the fact he's winning?
Well, that's part of it too, right? Is like people are tired of seeing. It's like it's really cool, and it's like, oh, look, he's the underdog, and now it's like, God, I'm tired of that guy kicking my team's ass.
Yeah,
and I get that too.
Yeah,
but I feel like Pat is the number one current answer for most people.
Yeah, I feel like Brady got some of that too, though.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Anybody else that comes to mind as I've tried to jog your memory here? And is there anybody that's the inverse, where you like can't stand watching them play, but you're like, oh, but you're a great dude?
Well, I'm not the biggest fan of Chris Paul.
On the floor or off? Or both? Because that's not really the...
On the floor.
I think Chris Paul's a good inverse one. Where like on the floor, Chris Paul's annoying.
Yeah.
Especially like younger Chris Paul was, I think, a little more fun. But Chris Paul's annoying as hell. He's chirping at the referees off the court. Grade A. Apparently just awesome dude.
Yeah.
Like done so much for the
Paul
NBA PA. Great leader on a bunch of important issues. Done like amazing in the community. He's apparently like a great friend.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie, Craig. I went on a rant. I want to say this was 3 years ago when the Bucks won the NBA Finals. So 2020, is that 2021 or 2022?
I think 21.
Yeah, that year I went on a rant about Chris Paul.
Yeah, it was 21 because they then got on the plane and went to the Olympics, like a couple of those guys. And that was the 2020 Olympics that got rescheduled to 21.
Yeah.
What was your Chris Paul rant? It was like so bad.
It was real bad. I actually don't want to repeat because I called him a loser.
That's too much.
Yeah, it was a little aggressive. I essentially said the guy doesn't have championship DNA. Like I was going in, Craig.
Oh man, yeah.
Like,
to me, Chris Paul is a guy who hasn't won a championship, not isn't a champion. I think there's a distinction there.
Yeah. That's a bit much.
Russell Westbrook's kind of in that category for me too.
Real?
I think Russ, like off the court, the things he stands up for, the things that he says, I actually enjoy like his fashion. Like he's really in that world.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I love everything he's ever put on. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's my style. But like, no, that's his thing. Like he stands up for his culture and like the things that are important to him. And as a player, I found him tremendously annoying at times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good off-season, like middle of July topic.
For sure.
We need to bring that one back.
Gotcha. Write it down.
Yeah. Put that one. But just go ahead and create like July 8th in the rundown. Just like put that at 4:30. Just like safely, we're probably good on July 8th. Something stupid's gonna happen on July 8th, and it's gonna blow up the rundown. We've only been waiting on that thing for 5 months. All right. Do we have any real things, Anthony?
Yes, we do, sir.
All right. Well, then let's quickly get to them, shall we?
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, we got a couple of good ones. Let's go with the Markieff Morris one because I think this is so funny. Markieff Morris was a part of the Luka Doncic trade, which was something that was very funny to Markieff Morris.
With me being traded, then I got that call from that agent at 1 o'clock in the morning. I knew what time it was. Saying that I was traded, man. And when it first happened, I was in shock because, obviously, I haven't played in a couple years, like, you know what I'm saying? So my first thing is who the hell want me? Like, you know what I'm saying? Who wants to trade for me? I know, it's me by myself because at the time I didn't know that Luka and Maxey was getting traded. All I knew that I was getting traded. So
that is so funny. Could you imagine? Hey, we're gonna trade you because he hasn't played. So that was, by the way, on the Twins podcast where he does with his brother. Hey, we're trading you, and you don't know that you're a part of the biggest deal in the last decade of the NBA.
Yeah.
And I still cannot believe that the Utah Jazz did not know that they were a part of. They're just like, hey, do you want 2 second-round picks? Or can we get 2 second-round picks for this contract? Or we'll give you 2 second-round picks for taking on this contract of a guy that nobody's heard of? Yeah, sure. We can help you there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. We're working on something else. We'll call you back to get it done with the league office. Okay, cool. Thanks. 30 minutes before the trade gets done, it's already on paper. It's already been submitted to the league. Hey, by the way, just so you know, the other piece of this trade, Anthony Davis is going to go to Dallas, and Luka's going to go to crazy.
In the wee hours of the night.
And the players involved, what a weird business. That's our show for today. Wizards, Pacers, final game before the break is next. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 on The Hoffman Show.